Hello everyone, hope everybody's doing well. Today I'm doing well myself. This is episode number 11 of the PS1 Vlog Series on the Tonville Legend 826 channel. So I'm in front of PS1, as you can clearly see. I'm in front of PS1, I'm around the school, I'm in front of PS1. So yeah, I'm going to talk about, on this episode of the PS1 Vlog Series, about, let me think. I'm going to talk about my favorite parts of season 6 of The Walking Dead. Now, season 6 of The Walking Dead is pretty cool in my opinion. It was a pretty good season, you know, where he had Rick and his group of survivors helping out the group in Alexandria, and they're all fighting against all the saviors, you know, and they were fighting them all, killing them all. You know, until Negan came into the picture at the very end of the series, at the end of the season, end of season 6, we all know how that turned out. Yeah, so let's talk about that then. We'll just talk about what happened up until that point, and talk about the important parts, and just like conclude it and finish off at the end of season 6, where Negan like meets Rick and his group. So Rick and his group were all trying to work together with the people of Alexandria and the Hilltop and all those people, the Commonwealth. They're all working together against the saviors. They have to work for the saviors, and Rick and his group are trying to free them all from Negan's slavery, from Negan's servitude. So therefore, Rick ends up like the first half of season 6 is Rick and his group of Alexandria survivors trying to survive and stick together like throughout the season, because there are still walkers for them to have to worry about, the zombies, you know, the walkers trying to go after Rick and his group. So, you know, now the Anderson family, Sam, Ron, and Jesse, characters that, while not exactly characters that I'm big fans of, you know, they did serve a purpose in season 6 of The Walking Dead. You know, like for instance, there was like Ron, of course, who was like bitter and upset that Rick killed his father, so he ends up holding a grudge against Rick and Carl because his father was killed by Rick's father. So Ron ends up holding a grudge against Rick and Carl because of that, even though his father was a horrible person and honestly deserved what happened to him, given the fact that he did some horrible things to people, and he got innocent people killed. So yeah, Ron's father, you know, Pete Anderson, is not an innocent person in the slightest. He deserved his fate, I feel like, to some extent. You know, he had to be taught a lesson, so that's exactly why Rick ended up murdering him, so they could no longer be responsible for killing people. So yeah, as I was saying, you know, so Ron obviously ends up holding a grudge against Rick and Carl for his remaining time in the series because of the fact that Ron's father was killed by Carl's father, Rick. So of course it's obviously like something that obviously is really dumb to hold a grudge over. Like, I mean, yeah, it's your own father, but your father was a murderer and he abused you. I feel like I'd be thanking Rick if I was in Ron's place, if anything. So yeah. So Ron is really dumb to hold onto that grudge towards Rick and Carl because of the fact that his father was killed by Carl's father, despite the fact that his father Pete was responsible for killing people and was an abuser towards his wife and children. You know, so Ron really was dumb to hold on to that grudge towards Rick and Carl because of the fact that Rick killed Pete. But anyways, yeah. So that was that, and there's also Jesse, you know, the wife of Pete, Jesse Anderson, who Rick ends up like falling in love with, even though Jesse and Rick were not really a good match in all honesty, because, you know, Jesse was kind of like a character that was going to be very short-lived and temporary. So yeah, I mean Jesse was not going to last very long on the show anyway, let's be real. So she and Rick were not really a good match in my opinion, but I mean, at the same time, however, you know, Rick Rick and Jesse did end up being an item for a while. For a very short while, they were together until Jesse's, death in season 6. Oh yeah, speaking of that, Jesse, Ron, and Sam were all killed in season 6 of The Walking Dead. Now, Sam Anderson was kind of like a useless character. He was kind of a weak character. He was scared because of Carol baking him, because he wanted cookies from Carol, and Carol ended up telling a story that was very frightening to Sam. Carol probably shouldn't have done that, but Sam was a useless character anyway. He was too scared. He was definitely a weak character. He would have been killed sooner if not later. But off topic, Major Dodson, who plays Sam Anderson on The Walking Dead, ended up playing the role of Raimi Steele in the 2014 Left Behind film. For 2014, so that's where the Walking Dead and Left Behind universe end up having a sort of like a crossover, Walking Dead meets Left Behind or something, however you want to call it. But anyways, yeah. So Sam was kind of like a useless character, a weakling, if you will. I was gonna get killed sooner if not later. So anyways, Rick. So the Anderson family were all killed by episode 9, I think, of season 6 of The Walking Dead, around that point. Yeah, episode 9, around that point. Because then the walkers broke through the campground in Alexandria, so they all had to flee. And, during that time, Ron, Sam, and Jesse all get killed. Sam gets bitten by the walkers. Jesse tries to save her son, but ends up getting killed herself. And Rick ends up feeling a lot of memories flow through Rick's mind, and flooding through Rick's mind as he sees Jesse get killed by the walkers, and then Rick ends up pulling a gun and points it at Rick, and he's about to shoot Rick when all of a sudden Michonne ends up slicing him with her katana, and Ron ends up getting killed by the walkers. So yeah, that was the end of the Anderson family. Honestly, not really characters that were going to survive very long anyway, so honestly, not really something I was too upset about. Especially not saddened by what happened to Ron. Let's be real. Ron kind of brought that upon himself, and even then he didn't have much to live for anyway, because in fact this whole family was killed, so exactly. So not really much of a big loss. But of course, Carl and Enid, there were some good moments between those two, where Carl and Enid ended up fighting walkers together. And since Ron got killed, and Enid and Ron broke up, so Enid and Carl possibly hinted a possible romance later in The Walking Dead, on the show. If you've seen the episodes, If not, then just watch episodes and find out for yourself. But anyways, yeah. So there were some moments between Enid and Carl. They were fighting walkers and working together. And Rick and his group continued to help out the Alexandrians, the people in the hilltop, all those people to work against the saviors. They ended up sabotaging a savior outpost, and they ended up killing so many saviors, so many of them, and there's some of them in their sleep even. And then eventually, the end of the season arrives, the end of season 6, and that's when Negan arrives, and he ends up giving a speech about how he doesn't appreciate Rick killing his men, and he talks about how he wants to be in control over them, and that they work for him, and they have to do what he says. And to make an example out of them, he ends up killing Abraham Ford at the end of season 6, and then all that turned out. Someone else got killed, and I'll talk about that in the video. And yeah, he ends up killing two of Rick's fellow allies. So it's an awful fate for them, but they did kill Negan's people, to be fair, so it is what it is. Well, yeah, season 6 of The Walking Dead is pretty cool in my opinion, a pretty good season in my opinion. No, definitely well written. Oh, and speaking of which, when Ron was killed, he fired a bullet from his gun that ended up going through Carl's eye, and Rick was forced to cut Carl's eye out, yeah, Carl's eye had to be cut out because of the fact that his eye got shot. So the ends up having to wear like some kind of like, how do you call it, like a sling through his eye sockets, in order to cover up the eye. So yeah, so he ends up having only one eye for the remaining time of the show. So yeah, those are my thoughts on season 6 of The Walking Dead. Take care, everybody. Another video for the Tonva Legend 826 channel. Take care, everyone.